Thank you. Last week, there was a letter in The Guardian from a Robert Beckford saying that the plaque they were going to put up in the Guildhall in front of an enslaver called William Beckford was actually totally inadequate and an insult to his ancestors. I assume with the name Beckford, that means that at one stage, William Beckford or his family owned, in inverted commas, the ancestors of Robert Beckford. This made me have a look at William Beckford to see what kind of person the elite in this country are so keen to have a statue of. So William Beckford lived from 1709 to 1770. The Beckford family had been involved in both the West India trade and as contractors supplying the Royal Navy since the mid-1660s. The London branch of the family, Richard and Thomas, supplied the Royal Navy with cheap clothing for sailors. In 1668, Thomas is on record as bribing Samuel Pepys, Chief Secretary of the Admiralty, with a gift of £50, worth probably £200,000 today, and a silver warming pan, which helped secure naval contracts worth £24,800, which is the equivalent in today's money of £100 million. Money well spent. Meanwhile, another branch of the family made their money in the West Indies. Peter Beckford arrived in Jamaica in 1662, starting his career as a horse trader, some said as a horse rustler. However, he quickly realised that landowning based on enslaved labour was a surer route to profits. Peter Beckford soon built up his holding to 4,000 acres. He was a member of the House of Assembly, a colonel in the militia, and later Chief Justice and Lieutenant Governor. When he died in 1710, he was the richest landowner in Jamaica with 20 Jamaican estates and 1,500 enslaved workers. His grandsons, of whom the William Beckford, whose statue is in the Guildhall, was the second. They were sent to England to be educated. Following the death of his father in 1735, William Beckford returned to Jamaica and was heavily involved in the colony's politics while managing and increasing his estates. He was renowned for his ruthless pursuit of those to whom he lent money, foreclosing at the first opportunity. William Beckford returned to London permanently in 1770. He was now rich enough to think he could insert himself into the ruling class of England. This was easier said than done. Power in England in the mid-1700s was firmly under the control of the landed aristocracy, who sat in the House of Lords and frequently used their dominant position in the locality to select who represented a constituency in the House of Commons. By the middle of the 18th century, there were an increasing number of businessmen who had made vast sums of money from all aspects of the business of slavery. They had enough money to buy land and were starting to do so, thinking that they could thereby buy their way into the ruling elite. This was the context in which William Beckford purchased Fonthill Estate in Wiltshire in 1745 for £32,000, equivalent to 91 million in today's money. His first entry in the House of Commons came shortly afterwards in 1747, when he bought his way into being MP for Shaftesbury. His first intervention in Parliament was predictably in support of the West India sugar interest. In 1752, he purchased his way into the Ironmongers' Company and secured election as an alderman, from which power base he secured election as one of the MPs for London in 1754. He represented the City of London until his death in 1770, served as Sheriff of London, was twice Lord Mayor. He was now one of the richest men in England, and his position as alderman in London and member of the Ironmongers' Company gave him the excuse to entertain lavishly. Indeed, his banquets and other parties outdid any other during the time when extravagant entertainment was very much part of the political process. His principal interests in Parliament were the defence of the West India interest, the promotion of imperial expansion and reform of the electoral system. He was recognised very much as the parliamentary leader of the West India interest. Now, Beckford had a reputation for radicalism, but this was limited in practice to demanding a place at the table for the arriviste bourgeoisie of which he was part. There's no sense that he wanted the franchise to be extended to the urban working class, the rural landless labourers, or any other section of the poor, deserving or not. And even this limited radicalism by the oligarchs of the West India interest was not to last. They bought land, built stately homes, learned upper-class manners, and probably most importantly, married their daughters into the old aristocracy. The 1760 uprising in Jamaica, known as Tacky's Rebellion, sobered him somewhat and diverted his attention to demanding that 2,000 regular British soldiers might be permanently stationed on the island. One of the early centres of Tacky's Rebellion in 1760 was the Ester estate, owned by William Beckford. This was probably the most dangerous slave rebellion in the British Empire until the so-called Baptist War of 1831 to 32. William Beckford died in 1770. After his death, his friends and fellow oligarchs did their best to promote his memory, in part in order to facilitate their own entry into the snobbish elite circles, as well as sanitising the colonial origins of so much city money. A statue was placed in Guildhall, where it remains today. In January 2021, responding to the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter campaign, the City of London Corporation voted to remove 2 monuments to British politicians linked to transatlantic slave trafficking, one of which is the statue of William Beckford. However, in October of that year, when agitation had died down and following the intervention of the Ministry of Culture, the corporation voted in favour of retaining these two statues linked to the transatlantic traffic in their Guildhall headquarters. They did agree to add plaques to the statues, and the merchant, the statue of William Beckford and John Cass, to explain how they profited from the 18th century, from the 18th century business of slavery. Last I saw, nothing had been erected, although I suspect they probably put some shabby apology up by now. So why do they go to such lengths to defend these statues? I would argue, in part, it's part of their propaganda and self-justification. It creates a narrative of nobility, which forms an ideological justification for the money-making of the present oligarchs and reinforces their feelings of entitlement. So I'd like to propose that the statue of Beckford be replaced by a monument to the courage of those who fought for their freedom in Tacky's Rebellion of 1760. That would seem one suitable way of dealing with this, when clearly a small plaque beside it is going to go unnoticed. Thanks very much.
Great. Thanks very much for that bit of research into the history there, Steve. It's always interesting to see the lengths to which you go to unearth to dig up these secrets that these wealthy oligarchs owned and profited and benefited from the enslavement of our ancestors. So thank you very much for that. I'll open the floor to questions. But I know that, Steve, that you're also engaged with the Jeffrey Museum, and you've been campaigning for that in Hackney, for the removal of that in Hackney for a while. Can you update us on that in any shape?
Yes, there was quite an active campaign to have the statue of Robert Jeffrey. Some of you will have heard me speak of the man before. He fairly similar career to the Beckford that I've just indicated. but slightly earlier, and a man involved with the Royal African Company and a part owner of two ships engaged in the traffic. I helped write a pamphlet outlining how Geoffrey made his money. We had a meeting with the management of the Geoffrey Museum, now renamed the Museum of the Home, and they keep saying they're going to do something. They keep saying they're engaging with local young people as to the best way to deal with this. But they're waiting for the government to post its guidelines on how such statues and other memorial can be dealt with. Meanwhile, the government's guidelines, which were due out nearly 2 years ago now, are still no one's done anything about. So I think I've just been asked to speak at a meeting on Geoffrey in Hackney at towards the end of October. We're just sorting out a date, so we'll let people know about that. It's going to be an in-person meeting, so anyone in the area, once we've sorted out the details, be more than glad to see you, because I think the government is intent on what it considers culture wars, a war on woke, as they put it, whatever that actually means. And I think, we can't back off on this one. We have to say, why do you want a statue for such a notorious enslaver, such a man guilty of a crime against humanity? Why do you want it up there? And if that means fitting their description of being woke or tofu-eating, Guardian reading glitter of Wakarati, as Suella Braverman referred to us, well, so be it.
Thanks, Steve. I don't expect you'll get invited anytime soon, because to speak at any of those events on slavery or on those statues, because I saw in today's paper, a woman being blacklisted by the government. She wrote a book about families and children, and there was a conference put on, and she was to be one of the keynote speakers, and they were suddenly pulling her from the thing because the government expressed that, they don't like our approach to things, as it were. And this is just children and families. You can imagine something as contentious as, reparations, how people are going to get blacklisted from platforms and behind the scenes moved by the government and others in preventing people from getting the information, or people speaking truth to power, as they say. Okay, if there are any questions or any comments,
I would like to
raise
say,
your hand, Frank. I see Frank and Deli did. Okay, you're putting up your actual hand there, Deli. So it's all right.
okay.
I saw your hand was up, so I'll go with it.
Okay, I would just like to say it was really, really good what you've said, and thank you for sharing all the research which you've done, and for the hard work which is involved in all that. And if obviously I'd like to support you in the Geoffrey Museum in any way I can, by turning up. But thank you so much for all that research. It's really informative, and I'd like to know how you do it all, really.
If I can say, actually, it's like, when you find a bit of wool on an old pullover and you pull it and it all unravels. Well, it can be a bit like that. You find a reference, you think, how did they find that out? And then you look where they found that out, and then you look where they found that out. And as I say, and before too long, you find the money involved. And once you start following the money, you find out the links and so on. A lot of them try to cover their tracks by giving a small proportion of their money to charity, but very often it's only to charities that aid some people like them rather than anything else. But I have never found any one of these philanthropists who made any money out of the business of slavery actually doing anything to even lighten the load of the enslaved laborers in the Caribbean. It's all whitewashing in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers, Steve.
Yeah,
We've got one more hand up, and that's Frank. Frank, you want to come in?
Yeah, there was a story recently of a Tory MP who was championing the reparation cause, but then they found out, or the media found out, that she has links to slavery, and she was trying to get them to, she was trying to get it suppressed, that she had these links, you know. So well, you know, that's me. Another thing is that the royals have or the king has said he's going to start an investigation into their links into slavery, because I don't think he knows that they've got links. But it's common knowledge that when you in the early days, if you wanted to start a business in the Caribbean, you had to get a royal charter. You had to get some royalty to back you, so that you can start your business in the Caribbean or wherever in the colonies. So there's a royal charter. And also, when we come to Beckford, not only is his involvement in Guyana, but there's the first one of the ways I've got involved in this is through Professor Robert Beckford, who is a Jamaican theologist who came over to England, and he did trace his ancestors from Jamaica to England. And I remember him going and knocking on one of the Lord Beckford's house front door and says, "Well, I'm your family. Where is my money?" You know? Those are the kinds of, that's why in a lot of the Caribbean countries, when they left the country, they usually burned down the records office to stop people coming and knocking on their front doors and asking for their share of the wealth. That's it.
Well, it's all in the cloud now, so I don't think they can go and knock on the clouds. Paul, you want to come in?
Yeah,
Any
I just wanted to say thanks to Steve for your stuff on Beckford. I've just put something in the chat. I just read this book just recently, Tacky's Revolt, and there's a whole. It's coming around backwards. Sorry, I've got a mirror image. There's a whole lot in there about Beckford, which when I read it, it really rings lots of bells with what you said, Steve. So what I'm wondering is, because I'm actually in St. Mary, not far from where Beckford has his estate, our local MP has now and again mentioned Tacky, and I wonder whether if you could put a little one page proposal and send it, maybe I could move it around in St. Mary here and see if anybody here can back your idea. It might even help with what I've mentioned in the chat, that Tacky's been suggested as a national hero over the years here, but no real progress towards it. There's an airport across the road from us that Luke knows. It's now called Ian Fleming Airport, because you know, the local connections here with Ian Fleming's James Bond stuff. A lot of us wanted it to be called Tacky's Airport, but we reached nowhere. But perhaps we can get it renamed one day. We'll see. And thanks again, Steve.
Okay.
Okay, I'll put something up. I'll write something up and put it on the website.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Sounds to me like, before you finish, Steve, just sounds to me like a worthwhile campaign to raise people's awareness. I read the book that you had there, Paul. It's really excellent, and I think a monument to Tacky is important. Will, you know, educate and teach a lot of people about that history of Jamaica. Maybe a crowdfunding or some kind of fundraising event if the government is not open to or prepared to just honor, you know, the work that Tacky did in resisting the oppression in Jamaica. But maybe the citizens and friends can take on a monument for Tacky.
Maybe
Okay.
maybe a statue could be erected here in St. Mary at the same time as one in London. Have a joint effort. How about that?
Yeah, why not? But I think for me, the priority would be for Jamaica. Thanks. Okay, I think we bring a close to the discussion on that bit. I've spoken with Steve and we agreed to switch now. Steve will take over. Thanks very much, Steve, for that presentation and all the discussion of all. And if you will now assume chairing and you'll assist me in getting my
Luke
presentation.
Daniels is known to us all, I'm sure, as President of Caribbean Labour Solidarity. As he said in his introduction at the beginning, he's recently been speaking to meetings of trade unionists and other activists about the question of reparations. So I'll call upon Luke to give us a report on some of what he's been doing, some of the latest situation, and I think probably to re-outline some of the basic arguments. We need to remind ourselves of some of the basic arguments for reparations in order that we can make, that we can effectively argue it with people, with our friends, our neighbours, our workmates, and so on. So Luke, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. If this works, this is how we tried it out early on. I can't see myself, but I assume you can see me. And you can see my screen, yes?
Not yet.
Can you hear me, Steve?
Okay. Yes, have you shared your screen? Clicked the green button at the bottom.
Yeah, it seems like my screen has somehow been changed a bit.
You're probably looking at the PowerPoint rather than the Zoom.
Okay, should I close that? I'll close that.
No, don't close that. You need to see it, but click share screen at the bottom of the Zoom screen.
Okay, let me get the Zoom back on. There we go. More. Share screen. There we go. Thanks.
And then you get an op.
That's it.
Is that better?
Yep.
Get in there. Oh,
yep. Sorry. You got it.
Okay. Now click over to from beginning and on the left-hand side, and that should start.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Off you go. We
you.
can see it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Steve. I think, the campaign for reparations for slavery, we've decided to make it one of our most crucial campaigns. We'll be focusing a lot of our energies in the next few years, or for however long it takes, to fight for reparations. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I was up in the north speaking to some trade unionists, and this was predominantly 98% was a white audience. And I was amazed at how much they actually didn't know about slavery. For some of the people, there were some who were informed and did the reading and so on, but many were already surprised and shocked to hear of some of the things. But and how I outlined the talk was to actually try and give a little historical background to the whole movement for reparations, which of course started from the moment the enslaved were freed. Some took the reparations with them as they left the plantation. And we know they campaigned and complained about not being paid from the word go. But in the United States, I think it took on another form in the sense that people started to raise questions with the government and then sometimes with the immediate state that they lived in. One Barbadian lawyer wrote, complaining, and outlining how much money he thought he was owed. And of course, he never got a reply. And this lady we see in here who's with Winnie Mandela, oddly, Queen Mother Moore, she did an amazing thing. She actually raised 1 million signatures for President Kennedy to complain about reparations and to make the case for reparations. And of course, that letter also got ignored. And she was doing that in the 50s. So she started a very long time fighting. But I'll bring people more up to date with what's been happening here in the UK. And you see the picture of the late Barney Grant MP, who was the first to actually raise the question of reparations in the House of Commons. And he had the support of some of the other MPs. And one of them, okay, Lord Gifford, whose picture you can see here, and some of you would also recognize Professor Very Shepherd and Bart Samuels, King's Council, I think they're called now instead of Queen's Council. This picture was taken at the Doughty Chambers in the UK. They came here to raise publicity about reparations, and I was invited to that meeting. So, I was able to take this picture with Tony Gifford. Now, I wanted to mention Tony because he supported Barney Grant when he raised a motion in the House of Commons. And of course, he would go on to raise a question in the House of Lords afterwards, being the first peer to raise a question of reparations in the British Parliament. This is moving too quick for me. Okay, let's see. I'm pressing the wrong way. Other people that supported was that motion was, you can recognize here, Jeremy Corbyn. He was one of the 46 MPs who signed the motion and agreed with it. So, Jeremy's been involved in fighting for reparations from, the time go. Also, it was supported by, some of you will recognize Tony Benn. He was a militant left leader, deputy leader at one time, I think, or cabinet member of the Labour Party, and he supported the motion as well. So we've had friends and allies who've been, ready to question and fight for reparations. This other slide here we're looking at here is, okay, so we know that some MPs have supported the motion, and they said that, the government should, reply to or at least discuss the issue about reparations for slavery. But what's happening with the prime ministers? We know Tony Blair, his famous position, expressing a lot of sorrows and so on, but not actually making an apology because of the fear that what that would mean. And as people have pointed out, when you make an apology, it's a legal term, and there's some legal requirements. You need to make reparations and promise to not do it again and stuff like that. So Tony Blair, no. The next prime minister after Tony Blair, I think, was Cameron. Cameron was, get over it. He actually went to Jamaica and offered to build a prison for them. Of course, at the time, the whole Windrush thing was about to break, and the amount of people they're looking to deport, and also the action that they take with people who were born in this country with Jamaican parents or came as children and who fell foul of the law. They, threatened to deport them and deported many. So they were building a prison to house these Jamaicans that they want to send home. And the other thing they proposed that they paid for was a boxing gym, as the, that's the next best thing for Jamaicans. And that was Cameron. Since Cameron, we've had Boris Johnson, who didn't, as far as I know, make any pronouncements on reparation except for this, when the now king was going to make a speech somewhere, and that was going to include talking about slavery. And so Boris advised him to, he's better shut up on slavery, or they'll come and get his duchy. You'd have to sell the Duchy of Cornwall if you can read that thing that's up there. So we know what was Boris Johnson's position. And now we've got Sunak, who is also no apology. We need to think about how good our societies are now and be thankful and just move on. So we know we've got a battle on our hands in fighting for reparations. Now, CLS has been involved, as I said, from very early on. This is the late Richard Hart, who was our honorary president, one of the founder members of the People's National Party of Jamaica. Richard looked in one of his books, Slaves Who Abolished Slavery. He paid broader attention to the contributions that the enslaved made towards the liberation. You know, there was never a moment of peace down there in the Caribbean. And of course, some of the propaganda in the UK and European countries was that, you know, slavery was not such a bad thing. You know, we were having a good life in the sunshine and being well fed and so on, and not much to complain about. Richard Hart, I think, exposed that lie in this from one of his books, Occupation and Control. He looked at just one parish in Jamaica, at the parish records. And we can see from that some of the brutal mistreatment of the enslaved. I'll just look at one, 1776, Jack, for being a runaway, to be hanged by the neck until he is dead and his head to be cut in the most public place on the said estate. You know, I think when I did this, I showed this to the presentation I did in Manchester, and people were really shocked. And I think the point that I wanted to make really is that often trade unionists sometimes talk about slave labor. And I say, you know, that is not respecting or what slavery was about. You know, people might suffer harsh conditions. And we know the British have been particularly brutal with the workers sending children down mines and up chimneys and the rest of it. So we know, you know, the working, the situations that the British working class was subjected to in earlier centuries were horrible, but it was nothing compared to what slavery was, you know, these amputations and these beatings. Jackson, for running away, to have his right ear cut off close to his head, his nose slit, and to be branded on each cheek with the plantation mark, you know. Yeah, so brandings, beheadings, amputations, beating, and no one escaped, you know. Priscilla, I think she's fell off this list here, but she too was brutally treated. Cat o' nine tails, 39 lashes, first Monday of each month, and that kind of stuff. So we know, and not to mention the situation for the enslaved woman, who was subjected to not only harsh physical working conditions, but also from rape on a quite a regular basis, as one of the slave masters who actually wrote a book, you know, boasting about his many exploits. And that's a fail. Now, reparations is not something new. It's been, you know, as I said, it's been something that we've been calling for from the time go. When the president of Haiti, Aristide, got the information and really understood and learned about what had gone on, he started to really get angry about reparations. He was elected president of Haiti. He started to make demands of the French to repay the reparations that they actually paid to France for their freedom. And as a result, the French and the Americans colluded to depose him from power and exile him into South Africa. There are other people who have been hurt for raising the question of reparations, and I'm sure more people will be attacked as well. So we know that this is not something the European powers will take that easy, sitting down to just pay reparations. Some politicians, academics, and celebrities came together to write to France to say you should repay France their money. As far as I know, you know, again, ignored. So the battle for, or the fight for France to repay Haiti, something that is ongoing and should be included in the fight for reparations that the CARICOM governments are pushing. Now, I should add that, we support the CARICOM position, the 10-point plan, and we'll be campaigning on that score in the UK. And we think we are ideally placed in the UK to raise the question here and be able to go and knock on Parliament's door every now and then to remind them and so on. So our position here in the UK, I think, is important. As you know, our role as CLS is to raise issue not only for what's happening in the Caribbean, but also in the diaspora. So we're very concerned about the many issues that affect the Caribbean diaspora in the UK, and we will be taking issue and fighting for that change. As this headline said, we still change to the past. This article and this professor, he's mostly looking a little bit at modern slavery and, trying to put attention on the 200 million people who are still enslaved in the world today in different forms, in different shapes, in different countries. Some countries more than so. But many of from this bit of research, many of the modern slavery is actually, they're actually living in the rich countries, in the more rich countries. Another legacy of slavery, looking at this slide, is where we had the whole Windrush scandal that some of you would remember. And, I know some people are more caught up with celebrating the whole Windrush generation. But the legacy of slavery has left many of the elite in this country, and those are the ones who make decisions after government and so on, who were making decisions about, how they will deport people and how keep them out of the country. And this is a British man wrongly deported to Jamaica. They took on the Home Office. I don't know how that case is going at the moment, but certainly somebody who's fighting the system, and many people are. My argument for us fighting for reparations is that, one, the apology is absolutely important, because unless there's an apology, there's no acknowledgement that they see us as anything less. They will continue to feel that Black people are not deserving of things, that who are you for us to apologize to? So it's one of the reasons I think an apology is absolutely crucial, because it can make a whole difference in terms of the racism that, we who live in the Western countries now face. And, we're directly affected by racism in every aspect of our lives, and our children, just because of the color of our skin. I suspect the issue will be a little bit different in the Caribbean, and those are questions and issues we also need to look at. But certainly the legacy of slavery has done immense damage in terms of and some of the 10-point plan is looking at the need to develop medicines that will work with Black people in the Caribbean. As Hilary Beckles has pointed out, many of the drugs that they manufacture or make in the West, for instance, for treating diabetes, hypertension, and other things, are not really suitable for working with Black people. So there's money needed for research and development of drugs, just for looking at the medical conditions that were created by a diet of, by a slave diet, that people weren't being fed properly, many times were being starved. And of course, one of the big legacies for me is the legacy of violence that has been ongoing in the Caribbean. When you think about it, Jamaica, it's the #1 murder capital country of the world. And at the same time, they're also the #1 in terms of the amount of churches per capita. So I don't know how we're able to balance it too. Most religion and most violence. Some of the legacies of slavery as well. And we need a lot of healing to happen in terms of what's going on around slavery. Much of it being passed on, the violence has been passed on in our families through our parenting styles, and many people feel that it's okay to hit the children and to, in some ways, I've already said, you know, me make them, me kill them. You know, they bring you into this world, I'll take you out. You know, people feel as though children, you know, they have every right to treat in any fashion. Okay. One of the enslavers, I'll just touch on Guyana in particular here, because this is Gladstone, who owned hundreds of slaves in Demerara, where the uprising eventually happened in 1823 in Success Plantation. And we know that he was one of the worst enslavers. He was treated so badly on his plantation. That's where the rebellion was organized, which involved over 1,300 to 1,500 people fighting to overthrow the system that was oppressing them. I was, and I thought I saw Nigel on the in the list, so I think Nigel is listening. Hi, Nigel. I think your presentation about the Demerara uprising was really excellent, and yes, you know, one of the different things about this uprising as compared to others that had happened in the Caribbean was how peaceful it was. And I think, no doubt, because of the influence of one John Smith, who was a missionary, who was involved with that whole uprising. People actually just put the whites under house arrest. And if you compare that with the reaction of when the revolution was crushed and the behavior of the enslavers towards the Africans, you know, hundreds killed, many heads lopped off and put on stakes in public places, most brutal treatment. Now this was John. This is William, and John's father was John, who was the slave owner, you know, accumulated a great deal of wealth. And so his son William could enter parliament, as we see there, 4-time elected prime minister in Britain on back of slavery. Of course, in one of his first speeches, he defended his father's, you know, interest in the Caribbean, supporting slavery. It's said to have regretted later on, but the damage was done and continues to this day. Now we know that they made a lot of money. You know, almost every big state house or establishment in the UK is rooted in slavery. You know, you just got to prick a little bit, or as Steve said, you know, just pull the bit of cotton and you'll find out the background to it all. You know, banking, insurance, everything, all built on slavery. Eric Williams, you know, clearly in his book, Capitalism and Slavery, outlined the way in which the Industrial Revolution was financed by the profits made from slavery, which in turn also financed the industrialists in America. And so we could claim that, you know, most of the world's wealth is actually built on blood, sweat, and tears of the enslaved African. And this again from the whole Windrush scene, another man, you know, how can they be so inhumane? You know, this is the thing. They've believed the lies, the very lies that they've spread to justify the enslavement of Africans. They seem to have really taken it on board and believe it very deeply, because, you know, generation after generation, the elite of this country continue to treat, you know, Black people as though they're less than human. but it's, you know, it's the good thing that's happening at the moment is so many people are really kicking off about it. When we started maybe 30, 40 years ago, complaining or raising the issue of reparations, many people felt, you know, not in my lifetime, wouldn't even get it on the agenda. You're wasting your time. Well, we're having a really good time at the moment, as it were, because almost every week or every couple of weeks, there'll be something in the news about reparations for slavery. And even here now, we see a UN judge saying that, you know, the UK needs to sit down and talk. They need to have a conversation, as Hilary Beckles is calling for. You know, let's have a talk. We know they can never repay the debt if it's calculated that the 18 trillion that some people are saying and more. And how do you even start to think about the pain and suffering that our ancestors went through and that we continue to go through in many ways? If we look at the amount of black on black violence that's happening not only here, but in the US, the way the police are harassing and young black men in particular, and the amount that are being killed. So we're actually under the same kind of pressure in some ways. We see reparations, and the British might be at the moment trying to dodge paying any kind of reparations, but we see the neighbors are starting to realize that they can't keep ignoring. Germany has paid some reparations to Namibia. We know it's not satisfactory, and the Hero people themselves have complained about the amount and how the government is using the money, which for us is an issue we need to, as those fighting for reparations, need to be thinking about. You know, if any money is given, how is that money to be spent? Who decides and where it's being spent and so on? So it's only by involving the masses are we gonna be able to see that the money is spent appropriately on things. I've heard people raise issue about some, you know, money. We need money for climate change and climate disaster. You know, that's a separate pot of money as far as I'm concerned, because the damage that's been done to the environment is mainly being done by the industrialized West, and they should be paying the price. Reparations for slavery is another issue. And yes, we need monuments, you know, we need monuments, you know, for Taki and for many more throughout the Caribbean to celebrate the enslaved who fought, and for others, you know, who continue to fight for better life chances for people in the Caribbean. I visited this museum in Liverpool whilst I was there. I took the opportunity. I must say it was a good experience. You know, we saw, you know, you'll recognize some of the people here. Born Grant, further down, I think there's Professor Vereen Shepherd. There's other faces. Yes, I think that's her there. And there's other people who've been involved in the whole struggle for fighting for reparations. And they had some artifacts as well, you know, bracelets and different things, bracelets and other things that, you know, are some of the stuff that they keep at the museum. Now, this is, again, some of the legacy of slavery, you know, 14, he was tasted at the back of his neck. There's other cases where one 14-year-old boy had been stopped 40 times and he was taking the police to court. They've never found anything on him. It's just harassment from the police. And I mentioned earlier the imprisonment and how many actually are imprisoned or die in prison. This is, okay, this one is not very clear because, but this was a logo that the Manchester City was using, which was of a slave ship as one of the logos. And some piece of the coat of arms, and people were complaining that it wasn't appropriate for them to be using that. And we know some of the cities in particular that have benefited from slavery: Bristol, London, Liverpool, Manchester, and many others. Okay, for us to already fight in the UK here to make a good case for reparations, we've got to engage with the white working class in this struggle. And we see the Black Lives Movement in the way in which they were able to topple the Gladstone statue and so on as very progressive, very an ongoing action that white people are getting engaged with. This young woman was harassed for organizing an event, which she said she didn't organize, but she was there. But the police kept harassing her. They took her to court. But eventually, they dropped the case because she held out. And, it just shows that we've got support for the fight for reparations. We need to lock into it, and especially with the trade unions, I feel where the vast majority of the working class reside or party to, and our campaigning will be with trade union movements. Okay, I think that's the last slide, if I'm not wrong, in this quick reparations. I showed something like 50 slides of the, okay, can we come back to the other screen now? What do I do, Steve? Pause, share. Is that the one? Stop video. Okay, there we are. Thanks. Okay, hi, I'm back.
Right.
I can see people now.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thanks,
Luke,
Steve.
for that rundown, and I think a valuable reminder of where the movement comes from, and that it is a social justice issue, and I would say, therefore, as a socialist and a trade unionist, it is a socialist and a trade union issue as a social justice issue. I was one other. You did mention Gladstone, and that he later regretted his support of enslavement and his father's as an enslaver. Well, he may have regretted it, but then when it came to the United States Civil War, he supported the Confederacy, the slave-owning South, and it was so. I think one has to look at some of these apologies and some of these apparent regrets as well. Yeah, I suppose I'll have to say it, but I don't really mean it if it's going to cost me any money. And one of the things that you showed on one of the letters there that you showed also was from a correspondent saying that we need to remember how during that period of the US Civil War, while much of the ruling class, many of the factory owners, the politicians actually supported in Britain, absolutely supported the Confederacy, so many of the Lancashire cotton mill workers refused to touch slave-produced cotton. And I think, we need to, that was probably the highest spot of internationalism in British working class history. But I think we can build on that, as Luke said, and take that forward. Anyway, enough of me abusing the chair and banging on.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything about that?
Yes. Thanks for that reminder. Thanks for that reminder, Steve, because I think, also one of the things I didn't mention when I said that, we have many allies. Hakimadi in his recent book, is pointing out that one of the biggest movements that ever in the UK was of, the anti-slavery movement, was people mobilized and moved for it. And we need to recapture that kind of, sentiment. Because I think on the whole, we like to think that the British, when, we raised in the Caribbean, we heard so much about British justice and we all thought, what a lovely, fair society. But, you know, as I've criticized at other times I've spoken, we know about the many injustices, you know, where there's the, you know, with the Irish people who were imprisoned for many years, the Bradford 4 and the, you know, Liverpool 6 and here Birmingham 6 and so on. So, and just recently, you know, of one man who was imprisoned for 17 years, and because he would not admit a rape he did not commit, was held in prison. So, you know, there's a lot left to be questioned about British justice, but I think there's a way in which the British population can be very fair-minded, you know, and I think even with all the bad publicity around the refugees and so on the whole, you know, British people want to welcome refugees and to help them and to show more humanity than the owning classes are doing. So I think we need to, in terms of fighting for reparation, try to make sure we can recapture that support from the ordinary, the masses. Thanks. If there are any questions.
Are there any questions, any comments? Raise your hand using the raise your hand facility at the bottom of the screen. I see Stephen Howard. So off you go, Stephen.
Yes, good morning, and thanks for taking my my call. I'm in Massachusetts in the US, and just a couple of comments, and I'll hear how folks respond. One reason why some whites are supposed to appear to be supporting reparations is because they are not children of the pre-1960 white racist parentage. Once the reparations movement includes human rights abuses in its language, then the United Nations must get involved. While financial compensation is mandatory, it is not the only form of repayment or payment. Building relationships with progressive African diaspora leaders like Julius Malema of South Africa's freedom fighters is mandatory for success. And finally, reparations must operate as an African diaspora movement, because too many times in meetings in America, some of those folks are saying it's only African Americans who should be compensated, and we're questioning why the Caribbean and other Africans should benefit from this movement. And finally, my last statement is, I would like to see a $1 trillion deposit as a 1% payment be set aside so that Africans could start benefiting from this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Luke, do you want to say something to that?
Yes. Why is it's fresh there? I think it's, you know, it's crucial that, you know, that we have unity, you know, throughout the world really in terms of pressing for reparations. And I'm really pleased that for the Caribbean and Africa, we see a closer movement of the CARICOM and some African governments in you know, to form a unified approach to calling for reparations. In declaring the 7th of September, I think the day when will be Africa Caribbean Day. I think those are good developments. We saw the president of Ghana recently in his video clip, you know, demanding reparations and supporting the action for reparations, and with the unified movement with the Caribbean. I think there's a way in which the Americans often, I feel, are behind politically in terms of radical politics in forming unity or forming a unified approach. So in some ways, I'm not surprised that some would feel that this is only something that involved the Americans. But it's for us to keep doing that education, and political education is a key part of this whole reparation movement. So by getting information to people, one of the things that why I'm pleased that the trade unions are beginning to support and back us, is that, you know, we can have publications made, you know, flyers, leaflets that we can get out to 100,000 people. You know, every trade unionist should have nearly 10-point plan in their hands, and also, you know, other information about why reparation is so important. So education is key to it all. I don't know whether, you know, $1 trillion would be a nice start. We see the Church of England here has put aside some money towards, they're not calling it reparations, they've put aside some money to help Black diaspora. But I have to be critical about the whole approach to that money, because one, none of it is to be spent in the Caribbean, it's money to be spent in the UK. The people who have suffered the most from the enslavement period, or the ancestors, you know, they live in the Caribbean. That's where the money, the resources need to be going. And of course, some money needs to be coming to the diaspora as well. But it seems to me an exercise to whitewash the church, as it were, because not only is that money got to be spent in the UK, it's got to be shown to be sustainable. So how are you going to be doing healing work with sustainable as one of the key requirements for receiving any funding? Okay, thanks. We'll take some more. I'll take a couple of questions and
Okay, yeah.
I'll let Steve, I'll let you chair.
We've got four hands up. So I'll take them in the order that I saw them, 2 at a time. So that'll be Everard Campbell and Nina Rice, followed by Marsha Hines and Ozzy Warwick. So, but for the first 2, let's have Everard first, please.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Everald, E-V-E-R-A-L-D. Everald is pronounced.
Oh, Everald, sorry, it's my...
Yeah, no, that's okay. Thanks very much for, you know, giving me an opportunity to just have a brief word. I had the pleasure of meeting Luke Daniels at the Patterson Joseph talk at the London University on Thursday. And I'm here for the first time. I've joined the CLS discussion for the first time. And all I wanted to know at this first Zoom meeting was, you know, what's the best way forward for me to make a small contribution in any way whatsoever for in terms of obtaining reparation for the enslavement of Africans over a number of centuries throughout the Caribbean and the Americas. That's just want to know a way forward, getting involved and making a contribution in any way I can. That's it.
Thank you, Everard. Nina, if you care to unmute,
Marsha.
yeah, off you go.
Yeah, I've done so. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Nina Reese. It's my first time at CLS as well. It's good to be here. I met Luke Daniels at the Latin America conference earlier this year. So my question is about the trade union movement and about specifically what we need to be asking for in our campaigning and in our fight for reparations. How do we involve the trade union movement, whether that be smaller branches at branch level or the bigger unions? You know, what is the strategy to that effect? Thanks.
Okay, if
Okay,
Luke,
thanks.
if you come back on those 2, and then we'll have Marsha and Ozzy.
Yes, thanks. Everald, yes, it was really nice meeting you there the other day, and I think you've just said it publicly, so you're just about to get seconded onto join in with CLS. We really invite you to a meeting. We are looking to build support. There's on our website, if you visited the website, you would see there's a place for you to join as a member. That was the first thing I would encourage you and everybody else who's listening in, because we're not a funded organization. You see, we're all here and we're talking, we've given our times freely. And the only way we survive is through memberships and donations. So please, that's the first step, join us. And then you will definitely be hearing from me about how we can work together. And for Nina, thanks for your question too, and for mentioning Latin America. That whole region is crucial for us as well, because throughout the region there's a lot of African diaspora. That is Colombia, Brazil, the largest population outside of African population outside of Africa. We're very concerned about engaging with and getting support from that area. With the trade unions, what we've been doing, and we're already affiliated to a few trade unions. One of the calls at the meeting that I did, it was for affiliations from unions. It's important for us because one is it does give us a little bit of money in terms of the affiliation fee, but it also gives us, some little bit more political muscle. It gives us opportunity to meeting with working people groups and talking to them and explaining the whole cause for reparations. One of the attendees at the last one I did in Chester, somebody came to me afterwards and admitted that, at first he was thinking, why is this, involved in the meeting? Was it to do with them as such? But he said he was completely, sold on it, and he's definitely will be supporting what we're doing. Many of the delegates who were present, they belong to their own branches and different things, and they can affiliate. So the first thing really for engaging with the trade union movement is to, get invited to a meeting. If you join a union for start, and especially if it's your union, you have every right to raise a question and also to encourage and ask for a speaker. Some of our members here in London, would be happy to travel around. I would be happy to move around to speak and engage with trade union members, convincing them that this is a cause that needs supporting. It's their cause as well. The crime that was committed was done in their name, and they have every right to be fighting to say, hey, what you've done is not okay. You need to sort it out. So we think the work with trade unions is very crucial. Join a trade union. There's a lot of trade union in the UK. The way it's done, there's a lot of trade union bodies that meet in the different boroughs. I'm part of one of those, the Camden Trade Union. And so we talk, and there's also another community members can unite that also take action, political action in the communities. So we have meetings, we talk about issues for the workers and also for reparations. So race and class, and I think living in the UK, most of the trade unions membership, some areas are white. There's issues of classism and racism that need to be addressed. The best way we can do that is by engaging in discussion and getting involved in the trade union activities, or involving them in our activities as well. So I'm really pleased that, trade unionists do attend our meetings. And we've got the ear of some of the key trade unionists who, willing to listen to us and support what we're doing. So yeah, we welcome trade union activity.
Thanks. You. Right, the next two are Marsha and Ozzy. So Marsha first, then Ozzy, please.
Hi, Marsha.
Thank you very much. Greetings. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this meeting. I always find CLS meetings to be very stimulating, and this one certainly has not disappointed. I am still coming around to the notion of reparations, and one of the major things that I'm still trying to reconcile in my mind is how would we stop capitalism and the Caribbean elite? In my case, I'm looking at it through the lens of the Caribbean. How would we stop those two ever-present, ever-powerful forces from derailing what would be the potential of reparations? And for that reason, because so basically what I'm saying is, as we think about and talk about reparations, what will the structure be let's say we secure these reparations, let's say we have this money, how do we stop it just being slushed into, you know, our Caribbean 1%, right? I am wondering if there isn't a bigger place for a discussion around non-monetary reparations. So I really liked, and this is one of the first times that I've heard it framed the way you have framed it, Luke, in terms of some of the you know, ongoing afterlives of slavery. So the levels of gender abuse, the levels of violence in the societies across the board. So I am wondering where I can go to kind of trace that discussion, if there is one, around the non-monetary reparations. I'm still very, very non-committed to the idea of monetary reparations, but access to mental health supports, access to psychological support, you know, focusing on doing some of the social re-engineering that is needed to heal our societies is kind of more where I am. And I just wondered where I could connect, if I could connect to that kind of conversation.
Thank you very much. Ozzy?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much, Steve, and excellent presentation, Luke. I really enjoyed both the content, but also the way you put it across in a very dispassionate way, in a very logical way. So I really enjoyed this morning's this afternoon's presentation, and I look forward for when it's up. And I'm hoping it'll be up on YouTube, because I think it's important to share it with my fellow comrades here and abroad. I had two questions, but Marsha cheated and picked on my notes and took one of them. So I will leave. So I will only have one question. You know, Luke, you said something which you said it in one sentence, but I think it's so important. It had to do with when you were talking about people saying that, or arguing that, you know, we could use the reparation for climate change issues. And you said, well, you know, those are two different things. I think that's really important, because you see, in addition to the reparations themselves, I mean, there's a lot of damage that would have been done in the post-emancipation era, in the post-independence neo-colonial era, in terms of the unequal relationships that the Metropolitan had with its colonies. And even more recently, in terms of the WTO ruling on the Lomé Conventions, which significantly damaged so many ACP countries, in particular Caribbean countries. And then, of course, the climate crisis. But that, I think you're absolutely correct. That is separate. And there will be those who will try to conflate that with reparations. So I was very, very happy to see that you made that distinction. But I would like you to elaborate a little bit more on the importance of not conflating these two things. I think it's crucial, or otherwise what can happen is that we get shortchanged, because yes, they'll say that, you know, they are dealing with reparations, and they'll coin it or frame it in a way that suggests that that is also compensation for the post-emancipation era, the post-independence neo-colonial era, the post-WTO ruling era, and climate crisis. Thank you.
Yes.
Right, Luke, do you want to come back on those two?
Yes, please. Yes. Thank you both for your questions. Marsha, I think you know, you're right to be concerned about the way capitalism operates and some of the ways in which they will try to steal any money back in a way, or control where it gets spent or where it goes if any money is coming forward. And we make the assumption that some payment has to be made at some point. Now we see already, you know, some of the heirs of slavery are making some payments. We see the church, as I said, some governments have been making payments. So we can assume that some payment will come at some point. How that money is being spent and who spends it and on whom, I think are the really important questions. The vast majority of the people who actually need this reparation justice, you know, reside in the global south in places often with extreme poverty, lack of education, lack of proper housing, lack of facilities and systems to support people. And unfortunately, I think these things need money. They need money for structure, it need money for pay, it need money for training, it need money for the research, it need money for all kind of stuff. And also I think that, the heirs of slavery or the countries that have benefited from slavery have made a lot of money. They've become rich. Whilst we are poor, they need to pay back money. So I think it's a crucial part of the reparations movement that monetary is included. But it's not the only thing. I think, as I said earlier, and the apology for me is one of the most crucial things. And in some ways, if the British want to hold out, let's have that battle. It gives us opportunity to fight for something. We're fighting for an apology, and we feel it's a just cause. And many of the British people will back us in that. So the more we get the opportunity to raise the whole issue about the historical crime that was committed, only this morning listening on the radio, I heard, somebody talking about, another crime that was committed against people, and they had to travel for 2 days. 2 days, traveling to safety. And I'm thinking, what about our, 3 months at sea often, just to get from one crime scene to the next. So we look at those comparisons. Now, yes, I think, Marcia, we need money. We can't do these projects without money. People got to be trained, people got to be equipped, people got to, because the people wouldn't be able to pay for it, for these services. If, for instance, we could think about, mental health issues or even just domestic violence, other issues around health. And those are real issues for poor people, and they're ongoing. Diabetes is mashing up some of our communities. Suicide rates, all the worst things in the region. You think of Guyana at one time was the suicide capital country of the world. We had the highest suicide rates per capita in the world. As I said, Jamaica with the highest amount of violence. This needs a lot of money, a lot of investment. A lot of people need to be trained up to be able to do the work with those affected. And how is that healing going to come about? There's a lot of healing money that is needed, and that's where so the money is needed just to facilitate that healing. So thanks for your question. And yes, as this money, it's got to go to the people who, are suffering still the effects of that crime that was committed, hundreds of years ago. Only agreement. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. There's Joseph and Ola. I also see Buddy and Frank. I'm going to take Joseph and Ola first, then Buddy and Lara, Buddy and Frank, and I think we'll call it a day after that. I think we've worked Luke hard enough, so that'll be the last speaker. Yeah, and then Luke will have a chance to sum up at the end.
Okay.
So are you trying to
disagree? Joseph? No, it's all right. You're chairing.
Sorry.
Right. Okay, Joseph first, then Ola. Carry on. Joseph, you're on.
You want to leave up my camera because it's blurred. Sorry, sir, I called me. Sorry. But first of all, I must say that I got mixed up with the time, so I joined late. I mean, I didn't join at the beginning. But reparation, like my friend Masha have said, is something I have difficulty with how it's been presented in terms of mainly from a financial or economic point of view. And so I think we have to find a way to make it more inclusive. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the International Federation of Friends of the Earth had brought a concept of ecological debt as an issue for especially countries of the North or into countries of the South. And I think this must be factored in. And I agree, separate from the issue of climate, because climate came about because the industrialization through the use of fossil fuel and coal and so on of the Western or Northern countries. So yes, although they're not exclusive, but we need to put it in context. And also, Marsha said almost everything. I want to fully endorse what she said. The issue of gender, women was affected more than men in the process of the dehumanization and the continuing dehumanization of one sector or one part of the human of our people. In addition, you have the continuing hemorrhaging of our society in a lot of ways. We are still opening up. To me, the whole system continue, whether we call it capitalism or what, it continue to bleed our people. Hence the reason we have violence, we have the kind of degradation we have. So we need to find a way to hold those folks accountable, not necessarily to give us money, but to help to get off our back, let our people, whether it's in our own judiciary, our own cultural norms, we need to find out our own self-expression, because even as we discuss that, we are doing it within their scheme, their language and everything. Finally, and I can't stay for the whole morning, in terms of solidarity, which this organization, part of its name is, we must, and I think somebody, maybe Luke or one of them mentioned it, the whole issue of solidarity, we must, maybe not him, to link all the other people who have been.
Thanks. I think we got a question. We've lost him. We've lost him a little bit there.
Talking people of African origin, the Brazilian. We need to see it, and we need to find a way to create space that we could have while we in the separate area, whether it's for the British people who were affected by Britain and by France, but we need to bring in the other people, whether the Portuguese or the Spanish and others, the Danish, bring in, see how we could have this comprehensive thing, because all of us are affected. So we can't leave anybody behind. It's a big task, and maybe we may not be able to achieve that in our lifetime, but we cannot see that separate. Right now, I'm very hurt because Haiti, for instance, the people of Haiti have said no to invasion by whether it's Kenyan, and we are standing by doing nothing about it. Almost nothing. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joseph. Ola?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Luke, and good afternoon, everybody. In fact, I was not going to say a particular section, but I'm going to go back to what the last speaker was saying, because there was a point where he blanked out and I'm sure it wasn't just my system, but what he was talking about was the de-link with the way in which the Caribbean Initiative for Reparations is actually delinking itself from a number of other organizations and a number of other setups, and therefore putting itself into a box instead of actually linking itself with the African continent and all of the other organizations that are asking or moving along the line of demanding reparations. So I just wanted to add that in, because I didn't want that to be lost. I wasn't going to mention it, but I'm sure that's an important part of what he was saying. For me, I think one of the biggest areas that I would like to look at when we talk about reparations is the whole concept of atonement. And if we have reparations or look at any kind of financial type situation, before we get to that, I need to be talking about meaningful reparations. Meaningful reparations, in my opinion, is not going to be given to us. It's going to have to be taken, simply for the reason that the whole system and all of the structures that allowed reparations, that allowed imperialism, colonialism, and neocolonialism, which is ongoing, all of these things need to be dismantled. And this is not talking from a Pan-African or an African perspective. This is talking from a humanitarian perspective. So as far as I'm concerned, in terms of atonement, how can anybody be talking about going to a solicitor such as Lee Day in order to find reparations, not just for the Caribbean region, but for anybody, when we know that the systems are still in place that will continue, just like they'd continue the French colonialism, which is supported by Britain, which is also supported by America, is still in place throughout the African continent, throughout the world. So my question to you, Luke, is atonement. How do we go about getting proper atonement for reparations, meaningful reparations, and how do we mobilize people to properly understand what is at stake? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luke.
Thanks. Okay, I'll deal with Joseph first. I think he was following on with a question about money, and I can understand that we've all got suspicions about governments and money and how money is spent. Corruption has always been one of the big issues, not only for the global South, but for the global North. They're the ones who fabricate it, encourage it, and support it, but they're quick at pointing out how corrupt our politicians are in the global South. And we have reason to be, cautious around it. And the only way we can do something about it, and this is why grassroots movement is so important. We got to be building our own little missions around in every country. There should be several groups, agitating for reparations and also making demands about how they see those reparations being spent and on whom and so on, as I mentioned earlier. But I think, but we can't do things without money. And capitalism stinks, yes, and clearly capitalism will destroy the planet if we continue on the road of continual growth as for the system of surviving. We will mash up the planet. So capitalism is in real danger, yes. It's been teetering at the edge for some time. In some places, people are taking action to replace it. We support those actions. But we need for them to pay reparations so we can have the services provided. And we need for the people who will be mostly affected by it to have a say and have the biggest say in how and where money is going. But we can't do that without organizing. Wherever we are, we need to be organizing groups and getting information to people and building solidarity. As you mentioned, there's what we're about, solidarity. So we're looking to make solidarity with everybody and that leads into Ola's question about the Caribbean approach as opposed to the Pan-Africanist approach often. I think I mentioned in my talk there that, there's real positive steps that are happening with the Caribbean and with Africa. And it's always been so. Caribbeans, whether it was CLR, James, Badmore, wherever, have always been involved with working with Africans for liberation. And we see, that we have one people and one cause. And maybe you missed that I said early on that there's a CARICOM African body government that is meeting every year. They've declared September the 7th as CARICOM African Day, and they're joining together to put forward the claim for reparations on both sides. So that is happening. I agree with you in some ways that I don't think the legal route is the best route. But sometimes that is the only route you can pursue. And I can understand if there's people in the Caribbean fighting for reparations, and they see that the only way the British will listen to them is by a legal case, you know, that has to be made. We who are in the diaspora, we can make a political case by turning up at Downing Street, maybe in 100,000 at some time, and make demands. But from where they're positioned, you know, I won't criticize the legal approach. It's got to be there. You know, that's what the British understand. Everything they do is now we having lawfare. There's a way in which they're using law to oppress people. We don't want you to run for president. We put a criminal charge in you. And that is a process that's ongoing. The way in which the law is being used to oppress and suppress people. And we sometimes have to use that law against them in the same way to get them to pay up, and if that's the only resource. But for me, the activism in the street and the masses is what is most crucial. But I would not rule out the legal approach.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much. Before we go to Buddy and Frank, there's been a couple of comments in the chat that I'd just like to draw attention to. We've been reminded that the campaign for reparations is not only for enslavement, but also for indigenous genocide as being part of the claim. And I think we have to recognise that not only did the enslavers wipe out the indigenous population of the Caribbean, not only did they wipe out so many of the indigenous people of the North American continent, but in fact, I was reading the other day that between 1660 and 1715, from Carolina alone, they shipped 50,000 indigenous Native Americans to the Caribbean and sold them into enslavement there. So you know, it's all kind of part of the same thing. And there's also we have a message from Dorset Trade Union Council reminding us of the campaign in Barbados against the Drax family. Drax is the MP for South Dorset, and his family has been central to every aspect of the whole business of slavery from 1627, and he's still the richest landowner in the county. But it's also that, by coincidence or not, God knows why they chose it, the barge that is to contain the refugees as a kind of prison barge is actually going to Dorset. So I think we send our solidarity to the to Dorset Stand Up to Racism, to the Dorset Trade Union Council, to all progressive forces in Dorset fighting against this kind of racism and this vileness that's going on down there. So that's just a couple of comments to come out of the chat. Right, we'll finish up. Last two speakers, Buddy and Frank. So Buddy first, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Steve. And it's very interesting that you, the last remarks you made was about Drax in Barbados, because Barbados is key to all that is happening. And therefore the Drax family would be also key, because he was one of the founder of the process that started in Barbados in 1627. And that family. And we must appreciate two things: that the 1651, when Britain had its, well, 1649 to 1651, when Britain had its civil war and King Charles was executed, that there was a battle in Barbados, and a peace charter was signed. So the Drex family would have been part of that. But then the peace charter was signed in 1652. And then in 1661, the Drex family would have been part of the legislation that was passed in Barbados, making it law for the first time in world history that legally Black people were considered not full human beings. That was Barbados Slave Code of 1661, which was adopted throughout the Caribbean and then in America after George Washington came to Barbados in 1751 and took back to America two bits of legislations. One was the Barbados Peace Charter of 1652, and the second one was the Barbados Slave Code of 1661. And in the American Constitution, I think the 5 main articles in the American Constitution would read as if it was copywritten from the Barbados Peace Charter of 1652. Secondly, because Barbados said that the law in Barbados said that Black people were not full human beings, America, through George Washington, implement in America that Black people were only 3/5 human beings. As a result of that, all people and nations of the world since then practice the principle of Black inferiority and therefore white superiority. So when we are speaking about reparations, we need to appreciate something, that in 2008, when this is following the 2001 World Conference in the World 2001 World Conference in South Africa, 2001 World Conference in South Africa, the working group of experts was established, and they proposed international.
Buddy, sorry, because of time, if you got a question you want to put to us.
Okay, yes, or well, that's what I'm saying. You can appreciate the history which form part of my questions.
Right, thank you very much.
I put the question.
Thanks very much, buddy.
But I put the question in the chat.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay.
So I like some response.
I didn't see the question in the chat
about the two questions.
I'll have a look.
Okay.
Was it there a question about the 1959 Mental Health Act?
That is one, yes. And
Good.
the second one is about October the 12th as the International Day for Reparations.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Frank.
Okay.
Frank, you've disappeared.
He's there.
I just didn't switch my mic on.
Right.
Yeah, mine is more about the trade union question, because I'm a member of the retired member now of the RMT, which is Rail and Maritime trade union. And for the last 18 years now, they've been sponsoring a conference on reparations. When I say sponsor, I mean sponsor in a big way. They allowed us to invite 2 international speakers every year. In fact, our first conference, we had Robert Beckford, the professor I spoke about earlier, who was one of the people who was going to letting people know about reparations. For the last 40 years, of course, we had it easy because the general secretary at the time was Bob Crow, and he was quite easy to approach. He sponsored us, and he understood what we were talking about, and he gave us the go ahead. Since then we've been trying to get other unions involved. We tried everything. We said it's a matter of unpaid wages. 400 years of people being enslaved and not being paid. So we look at it from that point of view. And we've tried a lot of things, but we found it very hard to get other unions involved. But anyway, we proceeded, and we would like to think we've even had David Comison who is now the Commissioner for Reparations in CARICOM, right? So we would like to think that the 18 years of putting that into the public sphere and also explaining to our other trade union representatives and members all about reparations. See, and I think I'd like to think that 18 years have done some good. So yeah. It is easy. It can be done. Thank you.
Can I say, the RMT has certainly led the way on this, but there are some others are coming along now. We managed to at least get a resolution through my trade union, UCU's annual Congress this year. I think the real problem is now for us is to make sure it doesn't stay just as a worthy resolution, but actually gets a bit of action. But we'll see. Anyway, Luke, do you want to speak to either to those questions, and then perhaps you can sum up and have the last word?
Thanks. Frank, you're absolutely right. RMT has been really at the forefront for many years of the trade unions actually pushing the reparations issue back in it. I still see, we have our yearly emancipation march in Brixton, and I know that's heavily supported by RMT. Matter of fact, I have many pictures of you, Frank, on those demonstrations. So one of these I'll show them to you. So RMT is doing a good job. We need to engage with all trade unions. I mean, UNISON is certainly, one of the biggest trade unions in this country, as you know, is certainly beginning to step up to the plate. And I think we can continue to enjoy support. But I hope we can continue to enjoy support from the trade unions in terms of mobilizing people and mobilizing resources to fight for this reparations. And so we can develop strategy to get ready to forcing the British government to apologize and to start to sit down and talk with the people they need to talk to decide on reparations. For Buddy, I'm sorry I missed your questions in the chat and I didn't see them. One on mental health and the other about the 12th of October. I think the 12th of October is a great idea, and I think some people are already using that date to mobilize around to do things. So we will certainly look to see if we can put on some event to have that dedicated day looked at. And but but I'm not sure about the mental health act or what it is you were asking about that, but it certainly is an area that needs to be looked into for people in the diaspora. Black men are most likely to be caught up in the mental health system, imprisoned, and suffer all kinds of emotional stress and strains and violence and police harassment and things. And mental health, something we need to continue to be thinking about. We see how many times, people have been, who might have been having a psychosis, get attacked by the police and get killed. Many have died in prison and in hospital suffocation. And so we got to keep raising awareness around mental health. And when you talked early on about the different laws about, how humans were being considered and how much of a human we were as Africans and so on, we know about the song in which, they captain threw live human overboard to claim insurance. And that was taken to court. And it's why we had that ruling about whether we were chattel or whether we were humans. Yes. Okay, I think I'll wrap up on thanking everyone for really participating in this and making it a really good discussion. We look at your questions in the chat. We'll consider them all. It will help to advance our position on different things and different issues, see which areas we need to keep building alliances, where we need to keep pushing, which doors we need to be pushing at. But more importantly, we want to really encourage the comrades in the Caribbean in mobilizing those missions. I was reassured in Jamaica recently when I spoke with some comrades down there that they are reaching out in the different parishes, holding meetings and meeting with people in the region. So we need more and more of that to be happening, and that we celebrate these landmark occasions to keep raising people's awareness about the slavery and about the effects of slavery. Often we in the Caribbean, at a certain age, we only learned about British history and other stuff. We didn't know about our own history, and we need to now get that history into the hands of our people and use this reparations movement for educating the masses about why it is the mess they're in really at the moment, and also to educate the white masses in this country that racism, is something real. Most of the institutions in this country have been declared institutionally racist, whether it's police, hospital, education, housing, you think about it, there's institutionalized racism. And so the only way we can fight it is by educating the masses about the whole reason for slavery and why reparations is so important to us. I thank you all for coming. We look forward to contacting you. We've got your emails, I suspect. And remember, we want you to join us so that we can fight together to beat this racism that we all endure in this country. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Luke, and thank everyone for coming. And the first Caribbean Labour Solidarity holds meetings on the first Sunday every month at 2 o'clock London time. I'll leave it to you to work out what it is wherever you are in the world, because I always get it wrong. And we'd like to see you again, and we would like you to join Caribbean Labour Solidarity. You can do that on the website. When I I'm going to circulate the once I process the video, I'm going to circulate where you can get it on the website. And also I'm going to circulate a link to joining Caribbean Labour Solidarity. And I'd ask you all to seriously consider actually signing up and joining. So anyway, thanks very much. See you next month. And I see Margaret raising her fist. I raised mine in return. Yes, thank you.
Reparations now.
Thank you.
And Frank's t-shirt.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye, Carol.
Thank
Bye.
you.
I'll invite some others.
EC members. Great, thanks. If EC members just hold on for a second. So we can plan our next executive meeting. Okay.
I wonder.
You know, it's Black History Month. You know, it's Black History Month, so there's lots of events and lots of things happening all over. There's a Africa Rights event happening today, which I'm going to after this meeting.
There's a big march today, isn't there? The first.
I think so, yes. There's lots of stuff happening today, actually. But I'm going to go to the Africa Right event that's happening. Yeah. Okay. Claire Shepherd, how are you? She's not present. And some people's computers are on, yes.
I think
Nita,
Ellie's still
can't
here.
reply. Yeah. They'll be muted. All right, Claire, we talk soon.
And
Nigel.
Thank Nigel for making an appearance.
Yes.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Gentlemen, before you
All
leave,
right,
may I say one thing real quick? I think during the meetings, you should keep reminding folks that it's being streamed live on YouTube and ask people to like, share, and subscribe.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
It's one effective